Hello there, and welcome once again to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett, along with Kent Myers. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues, and today something that's very topical.
Well, yes, we're going to be talking with representatives of the Oklahoma Energy Resources Board, the OERB. They've been on a time or two, and we're going to be talking about the subject, among other things, of earthquakes. But we're not going to limit it to earthquakes. We're going to be talking about other things that OERB does. About cleaning up the environment, education projects, and the like.
So many different things to talk about. It's all coming up today. The OERB is our subject on The Verdict. We'll be right back.
I've been fortunate enough to premiere every film that I've produced at Sundance. Seeing your film on the big screen for the first time in front of an audience at the Sundance Film Festival is unmatched. I'm Chad Burris. I'm an attorney, a film producer, film financier, economic development financier, and I'm Chickasaw. Nobody can argue that modern day media, cinema, has perpetuated this myth, this idea of the Indian and what that is. And just the idea that, you know, all Indians look one way or all Indians act one way is a terrible injustice. Being able to have filmmakers tell stories that are representative of some element of his surroundings, his upbringing, what they know, what they see through their own eyes, that other people get a chance to bear witness to around the world. I think that's amazing. For me personally, being an Indian today means being responsible, honest, progressive, and giving that back to the community.
Learn more about today's Chickasaws at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Today we're really pleased to welcome back to the set of The Verdict two guests that have been here before. On my left is Mindy Stitt. She is the Executive Director of OERB. She did her undergraduate work at Southwestern Oklahoma State University, joined OERB in 1994, was one of the very first employees for the OERB, has been there ever since. Prior to joining OERB, she was active in the oil and gas business herself. She has won a number of awards pursuant to her performance at OERB and generally in the community, not the least of which is being named one of the top 50 women by the Journal of Oklahoma, the Journal Record in Oklahoma, making a difference in Oklahoma. She is coming back for her third appearance on The Verdict. Mindy, welcome. Glad to have you back.
Great to be here.
On my right is Tim Munson, who is just the last couple of weeks, recently retired chairman of the board of OERB, where he served a 2-year term as chairman of the board. He did his undergraduate work at West Texas State University in getting both an undergraduate and a master's degree in geology. Has been a practicing geologist ever since, is now with Spartan Resources, and has been with Spartan for a number of years. He is active in the oil and gas business, active in the community, has won a number of awards himself. This is his second appearance on The Verdict. Tim, welcome back.
Pleasure to be here.
Glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
We always have new viewers, and some of those may have moved to Oklahoma and may not be familiar with an organization like OERB, Oklahoma Energy Resources Board. Yes. Why was it started, and what has it evolved into today?
Well, the OERB was formed about 21 years ago, and it was brought about by a collaborative effort among Oklahoma's producers and royalty owners in conjunction with the state legislature. And it's funded voluntarily by a 0.1% assessment on the sale of crude oil and natural gas here in the state. And it has a two-pronged mission. The first mission is environmental restoration of abandoned and orphaned well sites across the state. Last year we celebrated our 14,000th site that we have restored in the state. We have invested almost $100 million. We're right at about $95 million thus far that we have invested in restoration. The second mission, and the mission that speaks most passionately to me, is our educational efforts. And over the years, we have developed multiple curricula that are used in about 95% of the school districts across the state, K through 12. that emphasize the importance of math and science and how we use that in the oil and gas industry. In addition, we have other educational efforts at the college level. We have a scholarship program for students pursuing energy-related field of study at OU, OSU, and TU, and other efforts along that line.
And when OERB began, I suspect there was no thought that someday you might have to be explaining the industry's take on the earthquakes that have been happening around here. This is an example of how OERB has evolved and kind of become a spokesperson for the industry on these issues. So talk about the concerns that are out there and OERB's take.
Well, the OERB is strictly an educational. One of our missions is education. So that's student education and public education. What I can tell you, I can give you a little bit of information about how I personally feel, but the OERB is strictly educational. So from that standpoint, I can tell you that the uptick in earthquakes in Oklahoma in the last few years is of importance to all of us. We all live here. And there has been a focus in some media reports that potentially there is a connection between hydraulic fracturing and earthquakes or other things. And so one of the things I'd like to make clear is, what is hydraulic fracturing? Because I hear a lot of misinformation out there. A drilling or a oil and gas operation typically has three phases: a drilling phase, a completion phase, and a production phase. So hydraulic fracturing is solely part of the completion phase. So after the drilling rig is moved off, we've run casing in the well. At some point thereafter, we initiate the completion phase. And so hydraulic fracturing is a process whereby we pump frac fluid into the formation, down through the casing, out into the formation, and it's pumped under pressure because these are rocks that have very low permeability. So we initiate a fracture or a small series of fractures out into the formation to increase the permeability of these rocks. Hydraulic fracture fluid is about 95% water. The other 4.5% or another 4.5% is made up of what is called prop. And prop can be something as simple as sand, just like in your child's play box or sandbox, or something that may be a little more like a ceramic bead. But basically it's something that we pump along with the frac fluid to go out into the frac and to keep it open so that when we stop the frac, take the pressure off the formation, those fractures don't close down. We want those to stay open so that the oil and gas can come to the wellbore. So that's about 99.5% of what's in the frac fluid, water and prop. The other 0.5% is a minor amount of chemicals that we add to enhance the properties of that fluid that give it things like friction reducers and gelling agents. So we can pump the fluid at a higher velocity, and the gelling agent enables us to carry that proppant further out into the fracture. So that's what a frac job is. It's proven technology. We've been using it since the 50s, not just here in Oklahoma, but across the United States and around the world. It's safe, effective, and it significantly increases the amount of crude oil and natural gas that we can recover from these type formations. So the Corporation Commission and the Geologic Survey are not considering that to have any significant tie to earthquakes, but a lot of stories come out and misrepresent that.
Well, and there are a lot of stories of activities and complaints in other states where the principal focus seems to be on hydraulic fracturing, and those you say are very likely misplaced.
I believe so, personally.
Yeah. Mindy, what's the industry doing to try and address the problem?
Well, I think probably Tim can address that more than I could. I can tell you more about what OERB is doing to address that.
Yeah.
Okay, the industry is working hand in hand with the regulatory body here in Oklahoma, which is the Oklahoma Corporation Commission, along with the research entity, which in this case would be the Oklahoma Geologic Survey. Between the three, the industry and those other two bodies, we're working together to help find answers. And one of the things that we're doing is we are assisting the survey in putting together a clearer picture of the fault systems that exist. So in this effort, we have contributed millions and millions of dollars worth of proprietary seismic data that was acquired in the exploration part of our business to help the survey get a much clearer picture of where the faults are. And so the last numbers I saw, we had added about 35 or 36% to the fault database. So they started with about 6,000 faults that they'd identified. Now they're up to about 10,000. So they have a much clearer picture there. So that collaborative effort. Another thing that we've done as an industry is we have voluntarily plugged back wells that the survey or in this case the Corporation Commission may have identified as being potentially problematic as to where they're injecting fluids and as to where they are geographically. So only in areas, they have an area of interest that they have focused in on, and so the industry has voluntarily plugged those wells back.
All right. And Mindy, what are the OERB's efforts in this regard?
Well, we're just sharing with the general public what the industry is doing. And this is not in a response to the uptick in earthquakes, but this is something we've been working on for a while. It's called our Environmental Stewardship Campaign. And we're talking about what the industry does as a whole to protect our land, our air, and our water. And so as part of that, we're talking about seismicity and what the industry is doing to protect the land. And so this, like I said, is something we've been working on for a while, and it's not in response to the earthquakes. But we have developed fact sheets that we have on our website under our stewardship section. And we also are working on videos. We have a video on water and a video on seismicity, and in a couple of weeks we'll have one on air talking about what the industry is doing to help in those areas. And so, and now we are working on actually a television campaign, an advertising campaign that will launch in the fall, explaining more about what the industry is doing, and hopefully will drive people to the website so they can learn more about what the industry is doing.
Tim, talk to us a little bit about disposal wells. Some of the talk here locally has gotten away from fracturing and gone to disposal wells, and they're as a contributing factor perhaps to earthquakes. What can you tell us about that?
I can tell you that that is true, and they're disposal wells, saltwater injection wells, those terms are used interchangeably. Yeah. Okay, so in the state, the EPA has a classification. It's called Class 2 injection wells. There are about 10,000 disposal wells or injection wells across the state. Of that, about 60% or about 6,000 are used in what's called enhanced oil recovery or secondary recovery operations, and they're not of concern, because what those are is we go in and develop a field over time, the production declines and becomes uneconomic. If the geologic and engineering conditions are favorable, we can then implement a secondary or enhanced recovery phase. And what that involves is pumping water down through old existing wellbores or new ones and sweeping it through the reservoir to pick up additional incremental amounts of oil. Okay? But that's usually done at a relatively shallow depth, not in any concern about connection with fault. So the other 40% of the wells are the disposal wells that you hear people talking about. And of those, there's only about 1,000 that actually dispose into the Arbuckle Formation, which is the key formation here in Oklahoma that the survey and the Corporation Commission is focusing on, because that's the oldest sedimentary rock layer in Oklahoma. And it typically lies right on top of the crystalline basement rock. So the concern would be that if we are disposing into the Arbuckle and somehow we could get into the crystalline basement rock and come in contact with an ancient fault system, that could change the stresses along that fault and theoretically could potentially induce movement along that fault. Okay, so of that 1,000 wells that are disposing into the Arbuckle, there's only about 350 that fall within this area of interest that the survey and so it's a very, very small number. Although there are a lot of disposal wells and injection wells, there's really only a very small fraction that are in this area of interest. And what the Corporation Commission is doing is they are systematically looking at those wells to determine, did those wells drill through the Arbuckle and into the basement rock? If they prove that they did, then the industry is voluntarily plugging those wells back, and as some of the other things that we're doing is we're also voluntarily backing off the volumes that we pump into those formations. Okay, so we want to make sure that we don't come in contact with that crystalline basement rock where the faults exist.
OERB's been cleaning up the environment for a long time. We're going to get back to Mindy after this break. You're watching The Verdict, and we will return.
It's a North American energy revolution. We're the fastest growing source of new oil and natural gas supplies in the world.
The shift to North American energy will create approximately 3 million jobs.
All that money we've been sending overseas, $400 billion a year. Imagine that staying in our economy. It's a game changer.
Real energy independence starts now, and it starts with Oklahoma.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. a place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mindy Stitt and Tim Munson are our guests, and we are discussing the OERB and all of the wonderful things they are doing for our state. Mindy, it's a couple of decades in now, but kind of give us a recap on the number of wells that you guys have attended to, and really the decades-long cleanup that's been taking place. Okay.
Well, we have cleaned up more than 14,000 wells. We're going to be approaching 15,000 in the near future. And we've spent, well, close to $95 million doing so in the past 21 years.
Are you caught up with the, the previous decades? Because I guess they started drilling in Oklahoma in what decade?
Well, before statehood was
Okay.
the first commercial.
So,
the first commercial
over
oil well
100
was
years
drilled
ago.
in 1897.
And so, at what point will we catch up with all of those wells that were drilled, for decades and decades, and really no oversight, no cleanup was
Correct.
taking place in those days?
We have more work to do. I'll be employed for a while longer, I think, maybe another 15 years or so. Yeah. So what we're out there cleaning up are these wells that were drilled back in the teens and 20s and 30s. And these, again, like Tim mentioned earlier, were voluntarily funded by the oil and natural gas industry. So it's current producers that are paying into this fund to take care of problems that were caused years ago. So
no state money involved.
No state money involved at all. And so basically we go out and take care of surface damage.
Now,
so
if someone knows of a well, what should they do? Or if they have a well on their property that they've inherited, what should they do as far as getting it cleaned up?
Well, they can call our office directly, or they can call the Oklahoma Corporation Commission, which is a regulatory agency, and they are the ones that must recommend all the sites to us. We don't just go out and choose those on our own. So if a landowner calls us, we'll take all of their information and turn that over to the Corporation Commission.
Okay.
And the first thing they do is they try to find a responsible operator. If there's not a responsible operator, then we'll go in and clean it up.
Without regard to who might have caused it.
That's exactly right.
Let's change the focus, if we may, to Tim and Mindy on the education efforts that OERB does. You do things besides clean up old well sites. You have an education program that is worthy talking about. Would you go ahead and tell us a little bit about that? You
Sure.
Petro Pro, you.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up. That's how I originally got involved with the OERB, is through the Petro Pro program, and that's just one of our many initiatives. But what that is it gives people in the industry an opportunity to give back by going out into the community. They go through a brief training program. We provide them with materials that they can take into the classrooms, and we go out all across the state and talk to students from K through 12 about the importance of oil and gas and how important it is to study math and science. And so it's an opportunity for industry professionals to give back to the industry in doing so. So that's the Petro Pro program.
Now, do you make these education programs or presentations available to non-high school and non-education organizations if they ask for it?
Oh, yes.
If a Kiwanis Club wanted a presentation about
Sure.
what's going on in the oil and gas industry, you do that sort of thing as
well.
well.
We're more than happy to do that. In fact, I've been asked to do things like talk to Boy Scouts, 4-H. I've been asked to talk to Civic Leadership. Chickasha recently had me out to talk about energy. We do a lot of things with Leadership Oklahoma to get, there's a lot of energy is a very, very important part of Oklahoma, and it's amazing how little a lot of people know about it. So we take every opportunity we're given to get out and talk about that.
Mindy, how many other states have something like this, a similar setup?
There are 3 that are funded the way OERB is funded, where it's a voluntary assessment, and that is Ohio, Illinois, and Kansas. But then there are some other states that are going out and trying to find money and raising money to do educational efforts, like New Mexico and Wyoming and North Dakota.
Do they do restoration as well?
No, they do not. They are strictly education, and their focus is somewhat different. Like Ohio, they focus strictly on student education and education for first responders. So they're not doing a lot of education for the general public, but they're doing a lot in the classroom.
What other states, maybe you've answered this and I didn't pick it up, but what other states are doing restoration efforts at no cost to the state like you all are doing?
There are other states that their restoration programs are funded by the industry, but it's not a voluntary program. So it's not funded by the state, it's funded by the industry, but the state is actually taking care of it, of the cleanup.
They make it contribute.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you all involved in well site safety?
We are, yes. That's one of our main missions. I think one of the most important things we do at OERB is educating young people and parents and teachers about the dangers of playing around well sites. We started that back in 1996. There was an accident where some boys were killed where they were playing on a tank battery and lit a match or something and it exploded. So we started our efforts a long time ago, and it has grown since then. We started with a video, and now we have 2 different campaigns. One's called Dada Dangerous for kids kindergarten through 6th grade, and then we have one called Lucky for middle school and high school, which basically says, be safe, try to be safe, not lucky, and stay away from well sites. And so we just actually launched our advertising campaign with that just in April, and it will run through the summer since it's been raining, but once it stops raining, kids will be getting out and about and on their own, and we want them to stay away from those well sites.
One of the biggest changes in the last year in the industry has just been the lower prices. Is OERB, is its budget, is it affected by the lower barrel prices of oil?
It is. It certainly is, because it's tied, since it's a percentage, it's tied to the value of oil and natural gas, and so our funding is down now. But we work on a 5-year budget, actually, so because we know there are going to be fluctuations in prices. So we don't have to cut any of our programs. We might have to slow down a little bit, but we don't have to cut back too much.
Tim, approximately, if you have an estimate, how many students have you reached with the education program in K through 12?
Over the history of the OERB?
Yeah, how many years have you been doing it?
Oh,
You've been doing it since 2000.
Yeah, I've been doing it for a long time. I don't know. The number I've heard is about 1 million students a year are impacted, either through PetroPro presentations or through our curricula. So I don't know if it's a fair extrapolation to say 1 million times 21, but millions and millions of students have benefited across the state because of the OERB's education efforts.
What's your interaction, if any, with the state legislature? Do they interact, or is it solely with the Corporation Commission?
As far as our restoration efforts?
Well, as far as, do they ever want to tweak what the OERB does or its mission? Is there any conversation that's ongoing, or is it you're dealing certainly with the Corporation Commission?
Well, our dealing with Corporation Commission is specific to the environmental piece. I'm not aware of any. Mindy, are you?
No, I occasionally will visit with the legislature about just what we are doing. It's an education process with new legislators coming in and not knowing what we do or how we're funded. And so just talking with them about how we are funded, and then they realize, okay, well, we don't need to be doing anything different. It's working, and we're just going to leave this one alone. So,
all right, Mindy Stitt and Tim Munson, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I hope our viewers learned a lot, because what OERB does in the state of Oklahoma is fairly unique. And if you've moved here from another state, you might have no idea that Oklahoma has taken a very responsible take on the decades of past drilling vices, and have done so much to clean up the environment, and we all benefit from it today. But it's been a tough road getting there, and these 2 people are examples of the long road the OERB has enacted upon. We're going to get back, and Kent and I'll wrap this show up when we return, but you're watching The Verdict, and we'll be right back.
There are now 11 million of us who live here and work here. I was 15 when I came here 6 years ago. I raised my family here. I drive my truck to my job every day. The only difference between now and 6 years ago, I do it legally. I wanted to. Because this is my home.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
I think for us, once we got started and we began to see the tremendous need just within our state, it really was just a calling for us. The blessings far outweigh any obstacles that we've faced.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. We are wrapping up a show on the OERB.
Well, it was good to get another view out on the earthquake situation and another voice about what's going on and trying to figure out how to take care of that. And also, it's always good to remind our viewers about the wonderful work that OERB does. They do a marvelous job at no expense to the state, and they do it voluntarily.
Yeah.
That's a unique situation.
You look at a picture of Oklahoma City or Tulsa in the 1930s and 40s and just see this long line of oil wells. And the first instinct you have in 2015 is, oh my, the environmental concerns today.
Yes.
But they have taken care of so many of those, and we're grateful to them. Website information, OERB.com. And we have a website, theverdict.tv. Tell us about a guest you'd like to see. We'll see you next week on The Verdict.